The following is a production of Sharkflight Media. Sharkflight Media. Sharkflight Media. Sharkflight Media.
From mechs to mages or agents to argonauts, this is the world of Chris Kennedy Publishing. This is the CKP Future Books Podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to this month's edition of Future Books. This is the November edition. This month is a little different. Chris had some things on his plate, and so we are fortunate enough to have Kevin Ikenberry again, and he is stepping into Chris's shoes. So we are in good hands. Welcome, Kevin, to Future Books and talking about the November releases.
Thanks, Randy. It's great to be able to sit in for the boss for a change. So I promise we won't change anything up on it too much.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not used to having adult supervision, so I will try to be good. So the first book this month has already been released, and it is from one of our triumvirate of the wise old men, and he has not had a release in almost a year. It's Mark Wandry, and it's Blood in the Water, which is the sequel to Black and White, which we've all been eagerly awaiting. So tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, Blood in the Water came out on the 4th of November, and like you said, Mark, coming back to a storyline in the frontier side of the universe. So this is kind of it's not necessarily all young adult, but it's kind of focused towards a young adult type of audience. And, Mark just is a phenomenal storyteller. And I think we can all agree that Black and White is probably one of the best books that he's written. And I have not dug into Blood in the Water yet. I can't wait to, because I really enjoyed the storyline in the beginning, and I'm looking forward to see where it goes. I think, again, Mark is just he's a treasure in his own universe, and this is just one of those stories that it just really hits all the right notes for me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I have been fortunate enough to read the book, and for anyone who loves Robert Heinlein, if you can imagine Robert Heinlein writing in 2022 with updated technology, you will absolutely love this book. Another thing about this book is you can see how much Mark has grown as an author in the time between Black and White and Blood in the Water, because this book is so powerful and there are so many really unexpected twists in this book. This book here is one of my favorite reads of 2022. After that, on November 11th, which is this Tuesday, I believe, we have...
It'll be Friday.
Friday. Thanks for correcting me. On November the 11th, Friday. See, I told you, adult supervision. I'm not used to it. We have a novel by a guy by the name of Kevin Ikenberry, and it's called EMINENCE Protocol. And I think you might be able to tell us a lot about this book.
Yeah, who is that guy? So yeah, this is the completion of the Protocol War trilogy. So Sleeper Protocol, of course, was my first book in 2016. It was my first professional sale. And then I wrote EMINENCE Protocol, or Vendetta Protocol, after that, about a year later or so. And then it's been a series that kind of languished for a while. And, without getting into some of the business of politics and whatnot, it just was not a situation with the previous publisher that was going to move forward. So flash forward a few years, I waited them out and got my rights back to the story. And at that point, once I had the rights back, I approached Chris and said, I'd like to publish these again. And, by the way, as soon as I got the rights back, I told Chris I have now completed this third book called EMINENCE Protocol, which I want to go ahead and bring to press. And Chris, of course, was extremely supportive of it. So yeah, this is the third of the Protocol War books. Somebody's asked me recently if I'm going to write more, and there's a chance that I will. It's going to be something that I'm going to make that decision probably in a couple of months, just because of other things that are going on. But this kind of brings us to the conclusion, this initial storyline with Kieran Rourke and what he has been brought back to do, and whether or not that actually comes to fruition.
I can't wait. I'm really excited to read this book. I have not had a chance to read this yet, and I'm very excited for you to be able to complete the series. I know it's very important to you to be able to complete the trilogy that you started so long ago. On November the 18th, we've got a new science fiction series started by an author by the name of D.T. Reid called Mountain of the Gods.
And yeah, Diane Reid is a wonderful person. I met her through the Superstars Writing Seminar several years ago. She's a retired Air Force officer, and she's been writing for quite some time. Has had a lot of success with it, and she's been able to bring back her 7th Shaman series now to Chris Kennedy Publishing. So this is a fantastic read. It's something that, for me, I've read a couple of these books now, and it's great science fiction. She does great jobs with characterization and world building, but there's a lot about it that, for me, there's just some things about genre that it bends a little bit. So Diane is fantastic. This series is certainly worth checking out. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, Randy, I think there's 6 or 7 books that she's got in this series. So this is going to be something that'll be running for quite some time.
Wow. Then New Mythology Press has a new book from Scott Huggins on November 22nd, Responsibility of the Throne.
Yeah, this is going to be book 2 in Scott's Endless Ocean series. The first book, which I just completely blanked on, Responsibility of the Crown, his first book was just phenomenal. And Scott he's an incredibly talented author. He's the only person so far that has won both the Baen Science Fiction and the Baen Fantasy Award in the same year. He's a tremendous author. This is a novel that I know he's been percolating with for quite some time, and being able to get this out now is going to be fantastic. This is one of my favorite fantasy novels in the last several years. So Scott is just tremendous, and again, certainly worth the price of admission to jump onto this series.
Well, if he's good enough to win both of those awards, he's certainly got the talent to write anything he wants to. That's pretty incredible. Alex Rath has a new book coming out on November 25th, Active Aggression.
And Randy, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is a new series that Alex is launching, because it's not in this Terra Foundation series, and it's not a salvage book or a 4HU book. So I think this is actually something that's brand new.
Okay.
And of course, Alex is tremendous. I mean, for a guy as busy as he is, with the different work that he does on the professional side of things, to be able to sit down and write the kind of stories that he does, I'm looking very forward to this one as well. Alex is just a tremendous talent, and I'm excited to see where he's going to go with a new series.
And then we're going to round out the month on November 29th with a book that's close to my heart. Last month, we had a series start with CKP that had been published before. The first book was Prince Awaken. This is the second book in the series, called Prince Commander by Fred Hughes. Fred has started a series, and I've read the first 3 books, and I'm telling you, this is a tremendous series. The second book, which is unusual, is better than the first one. I would encourage anybody to buy both of these books and read them. They are reminiscent of the early Ringo novels. They are fast-paced, lots of military science fiction. If you like Honor Harrington, if you like John Ringo, if you enjoyed the Maple Syrup Wars, you will really enjoy these books. If you enjoyed Mutineer's Moon, you will enjoy these books. I can't say enough good things about Fred. I'm anxiously awaiting him to finish the 4th book in the series.
I say you're a little bit ahead of me, because I have not had a chance to read these books yet, and I know that there's a lot of folks that have really enjoyed what Fred's been doing and have sung his praises. So I'll take your word at face value, man. I think it's going to be fantastic to jump into this and see what he's been able to do.
Well, hopefully that recommendation will make you want to go and get a copy. November is a busy month. I don't see how Chris keeps all the balls in the air. This is probably the busiest. In fact, Chris and I have talked about it. I think this is the busiest year CKP's had. This does not take into account the overseas books, how many books that New Mythology has put out. And then we've also got all of the audiobooks. And if you look, I think we've got 7 audiobooks coming out in the month of November.
Yeah, and there's a couple we obviously want to highlight. I mean, I don't have the full list in front of me. So in the middle of the month, we've got a couple of books. We have the We Dare Semper Paratus book, which is an anthology. It's the second of the We Dare books that was edited by Jamie Ibsen and Chris Kennedy. I've actually got a story in that one. It's a lot of fun. And We Dare, I think that we're now into the planning stages for the 5th We Dare anthology that'll be out sometime next year. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Also have the Next Crusade, which is one of the Lunar Free State novels by John Sears. Again, just a tremendous series. And the audio versions of the earlier books have been fantastic. So I'm looking forward to how this continues. And then one of my favorite series that's been kicked off recently is The Last Marines by Bill Frisbee. And so you've got the second book in that, which is Darkness Rising, which comes out, again, sometime mid-November on audio. So a lot of good books coming during the month. And then in the very early part of December, we'll give you a little bit of a preview there. I've got a 4-H novel by Casey Moores, by Rob Hansen and Sandra Medlock as my witnesses. That's released on the 6th of December.
Yeah, anytime you see the trio of Medlock, Moores, and Hampson, just send your money in. You're not going to be disappointed. And Semper Paratus, that's the motto of the Coast Guard. So people don't understand how instrumental the Coast Guard is. They are more than just than lifeguards. They are that is a great book. I have a good friend of mine who was a inveterate reader like me, and he spends a lot of time on the road now and does not have time to read. And he spends a significant portion of his income on audiobooks, and audiobooks are a great way if you are a reader and don't have a lot of time and you spend a lot of time in your car to stay active and keep reading. And the books are not very expensive. So look at our audiobook library and purchase often.
I think audiobooks are a great way too, especially with the anthologies, to get an idea of different writers and how they tell their stories differently, what their different voices are. So I think that's always something to look at. I do a lot of audiobooks myself as far as my drive to and from work. And yeah, I totally think this is a great opportunity to jump onto some of these new series and go from there.
Yeah, a lot of our series start as short stories or novelettes in our anthologies.
That has been a running theme, absolutely.
So, one other thing that we need to talk about is annually Chris hosts a convention for our fans and our authors there in the metropolis of Coinjock, North Carolina. And that was last week, maybe week before last now. And it just ended. You were there, and a lot of our authors and fans. How did it go?
FactoryCon is great. You know, it was started, I think, 4 or 5 years ago by Chris when he and Sheila actually lived in Virginia Beach. And it was meant to be just an end-of-the-year party for authors. And it's kind of morphed from the business party, if you will, of CKP into bringing in fans and readers and just having this weekend where it's not necessarily a con and it's not a complete relaxicon. We have some events and different things that we do, but it's an opportunity for readers and fans and other authors just to get together and hang out. And so the week typically starts, everybody arrives on Wednesday or starts to arrive on Wednesday. And then Thursday morning, there's a group that's now, I think we're on our 4th year of going out and doing deep sea fishing. So you get up at 2 o'clock. I think Chris and I got up at like 2:30 in the morning to get up, get ready, and you drive about an hour down to the Oregon Inlet. And so had 3 different boats that went out, caught a lot of tuna. I think the total poundage caught of fish was somewhere around 500 pounds. Just a phenomenal day. We, of course, we had one boat. That was the boat that Chris and I were on, along with Joel Lyons and then Eric Ezel and Alex. I can't remember Alex's last name to save my life right now. But we were out about 37 miles and our boat malfunctioned.
Oh no!
And it was one of those things where, you know, Chris and I are just kind of sitting there thinking, well, you know, we can call the Coast Guard. We know that frequency from our military experience, so you know maybe we'll be okay. But they were able to get apart from another boat and they ran us back in. So our day was kind of cut short because we didn't get to fish enough. But phenomenal time to go out and fish and. So one of our newer authors that's going to be writing, I think, in the Old Rouse Legacy, Haley Gregory, she won the Biggest Fish award, which was kind of fun. And then so we gather all the fish, we get it all cleaned, we drive back up to Coinjock. And so the first real event of FactoryCon is the fish fry. And so for those of us like myself who, you know, we caught fish, obviously, but can't take it home, you pitch that into the general pot, if you will, and then we cook that. And so Yvonne Jacobs is the main cook, and she kind of shepherds the crew. And she did, of course, we had tuna steaks this year, which were phenomenal. And so we had a lot of tuna, and it was just phenomenal to be there and just kind of have that camaraderie. I think there were probably 50 or 60 people that had arrived by that point. And it was great. So then the fish fry ends, and everybody just kind of hangs out, does different campfires and whatnot. Friday was just kind of a chill out day. Everybody's just kind of around doing different things that needed to be done. There was a little bit of last minute setup things that needed to happen. But then that evening we actually had some musical entertainment and had a food truck come in. And so everybody just kind of, again, just had the opportunity all day long to hang out. Catch up with each other. We had folks like Casey Azell was back in the United States for the first time in 3 years after retiring from the Air Force. So it was great to have her back. And the authors get together. There were all kinds of little meetings, different things that were being discussed throughout the day. Folks getting together, doing writing sprints and whatnot. And then having the evening just for fellowship to all be able just, again, to hang out and be together was just pretty phenomenal. Saturday, kind of the same thing, just everybody kind of taking it easy. We did a couple of different things on Saturday that were a little different. One thing we did this year was to add a professional development kind of get together for the authors to come in and sit down and talk about some things that we're seeing, some trends in the publishing industry, if you will, and just kind of make sure everybody's aware of different things that are going on as far as the company is concerned. And then immediately following that, we went into a book signing, where we actually did a book signing event there in the visitor center at the KOA. Had another author or some other folks that came in from outside that were local area folks that came in to look at books and whatnot. So that was good to have that experience. Had a couple of opportunities for role-playing games over the weekend. So on Friday, I forgot to mention Joel Lyons ran a D&D campaign for a group of folks for a couple of hours. And then on Saturday, John Osborne took some folks through the Four Horsemen Rules of Engagement, some of the early work that's being done on that RPG. And so that was fantastic. I had a chance to practice a class I'm going to be giving at 20 Books Vegas next week. There's a lot of us from Chris Kennedy Publishing going to the 20 Books to 50K conference in Las Vegas. So I had a chance to practice that with some folks. Saturday evening is the big potluck. So pretty much on Saturday afternoon, after the cornhole tournament, and just, again, more opportunities to just hang out. Everybody gets out and gets their dishes together. We did this massive potluck dinner that I think we probably could have fed an army with the amount of food that was there. Was really phenomenal. And again, I think at that point we were able to see that we had 90 or 100 folks at FactoryCon total for the weekend, which was amazing. And so at the potluck, everybody's getting their food and, again, hanging out. But Chris then handed out the FactoryCon 2022 coins, which is great that we're able to do that. And I had a big bonfire outside the visitor center. And that was kind of the end of the official FactoryCon stuff, because everybody starts leaving Sunday morning. But Chris Kennedy and Mark Wandry and Rich Haley kind of got together and did breakfast. So there was bacon and eggs and some a bunch of different biscuits and all kinds of biscuits and gravy and just different things to eat there. And then that was pretty much when everybody started to head home. So I headed home shortly thereafter. There were some folks that stayed the rest of the day through Sunday and flew back to their respective homes on Monday or Tuesday. Randy, what can you say? FactoryCon is just something, if you are a Chris Kennedy Publishing fan of any of the books, we had all the Steversons were there. We had Casey Azell, Marisa Wolf was there. All the Four Horsemen core authors were there. Jason Cordova, Jamie Ibsen, Mark Stallings, Quincy Allen, J.T. Evans, Mike Morton, Haley Gregory, Courtney Farrell. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all the different authors that were there. So you just have this opportunity to just sit down and talk. And we had a big planning meeting with Matt Novotny and Maya Cleve and other folks where we just kind of sat down and talked about where different storylines going. That's really how this event has kind of evolved, and it really is just a phenomenal experience. So if you're a fan, you need to come to FactoryCon next year. We take over the entire campground, all of the different cabins that are on the waterfront there at the Currituck Sound. It's just phenomenal. I mean, I could probably sit here and tell you all the different stories about it for an hour or two, Randy, because it was just amazing. I love FactoryCon. It's something that's always going to be on my radar to go to, just because I get the chance to hang out with Chris and all the other authors, and we can talk about different things, the business stuff that we want to do as authors. But it really comes down to just being able to hang out, grab an adult beverage and just sit down and talk about things. And you really kind of recharge your batteries, because most of us live in areas where, we're not around a lot of different authors all the time. or we have our own little crowd that we're around, so we don't get to hang out with other folks. And it's really good just to be able to sit down across a picnic table from somebody and say, hey, how's things going? What are things going on that are working for you, or is it that you need help with? And it's just kind of the environment that Chris has fostered over the years, and we really enjoy FactoryCon. So not enough great things to say about the opportunity to get everybody together and hang out.
Yeah. As I said when we started the podcast, this is an unusual month, and I've already recorded the second half of the podcast before we recorded this with you, and the second half is with Mark. And Mark and I were talking about how unusual it is, how unusual a person Chris is, the nicest guy you would ever want to meet. Great businessman, great educator, great communicator, but at the heart of it, the nicest guy you would ever want to meet. And it goes across the board with everybody that is connected with Chris Kennedy Publishing. I have not met a single person involved from top to bottom, authors, editors, even the fans, who is not nice. And it reminds me very much of the books, the biographies that I've read of the late 30s and early 40s when L. Sprague de Camp and Isaac Asimov and Keith Laumer and those guys got together in those early days. And it wasn't called a convention. It was just, they would get together and talk about science fiction because they were friends. And they actually encouraged each other when they got a book published or got a short story published by Hugo Gernsback. They edited each other's manuscripts and cheered each other on. They weren't jealous. They were happy. And I have seen that across the board with the CKP authors. There's never any backstabbing or any jealousy. It's, I'm so happy that you got published, and it's refreshing.
Well, and it's something that we talk about a lot in two different ways. We always, whenever we're on a panel together and people ask, well, how does this work? We always say we're a family.
Absolutely.
That's just the way this has become, is we are a family. And we, not to say that everything is all, wine and roses all the time. There's issues where things are talked about and whatnot, but we all get back together and recognize that we're all in the same boat together. And that comes back to the second fact is a rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely.
And all of us firmly believe in that sentiment because, would I love for my books to sell, like gangbusters? Sure, I would love that. But I'm also just equally happy and supportive of any of our other authors who are doing that, because every book that comes out with the CKP publishing thing on it, somebody goes to that website, they look through all the catalog of all the different authors and all the different books. That leads to more interactions for that reader with new people. And I think if everyone kind of addressed it that way and just said, hey, look, everything, all your successes and everything else are fantastic, but when we're all together like this, we're all in this at the same level, and we should be encouraging and helping each other all the way through the process.
Absolutely. And I hope if we sell one book or if we sell 50 million books, we keep that attitude throughout the entire time that CKP is in business.
I think it'll be something that will help with the longevity, because certainly things will change. And from a business perspective, there may be something that's being worked on, or a series or an idea or even a genre that suddenly just doesn't want to sell anymore. How well we can pivot, how well we can do things together, again, as individual authors, but again, affecting the overall company and the publishing house, if you will. I think that makes a big difference in how things can continue in that long-term focus.
I agree. Kevin, thank you so much for stepping in, and I wish you continued success. What do we have anything before the end of the year coming out other than the one this month?
Eminence Protocol, and then I think we're looking at the second book in the Guardian Covenant that will be coming out. I think the date has been set on that one sometime in December. I apologize for not having it off the top of my head, Randy, but that's mine.
That's all right.
That's Vortex Stingray,
okay.
And so looking forward to that. I think that's my last release of the year, which is funny because I had 2022 was going to be a slow year, and then we came to republishing the Protocol War, and then the Guardian Covenant came up, and so lots of stuff there. And then we're looking at it. We have not set the release date yet. I know Chris is holding us a spot, but Jason Cordova and I are working on 2 concurrent Four Horsemen books at the same time, and we're looking to hopefully have that turned in by the end of the year. Whether it's released by the end of the year or not, I don't know.
Well, brother, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll get to talk some in 2023. And we're going to wrap this up and talk to Mark.
Fantastic, Randy. Thanks. Have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye.
When I introduced Caretaker before, nobody realized it was an SI because the SIs hadn't really been revealed in the biggest context. So now, if several people went back and reread Black and White, and they're like, that thing's an SI, isn't it? I'm like, you're going to have to read Blood in the Water and find out. But now they know. So,
well, the other thing I think that you really did that nobody else has done a really good job with is with the SI is you painted him as not good or evil. He is just completely focused on what his goal is.
Mm-hmm.
He's not evil for the sake of being evil, and he's not good. Good things happen because he's focused on his goal, and what we would consider evil happens because he's focused on his goal. But he's neither one of those things. He is absolutely centered on whatever his goal is.
Yeah, so, they will absolutely do their own thing. That's just how they're wired. Nobody should be at all surprised when that sort of thing happens. And this one is a particular type of SI that nobody has seen before, so that's new. There's a lot more going into it. It's the whole idea is this is basically a concurrent plot line that's taking place a long time in the past. Batshaw had been spotted and stuff, and people are seeing how that all shakes out. In this one, you saw the beginning of actually kind of saw the beginning of the rift between the Batshaw and the Killshaw, which is why you don't see Killshaw in any later books.
So I assume because of how smart the main character,
Harry.
Yeah, his brother, how fast he's developing. I assume that we are going to see something with him that is remarkable also because of the SI. Maybe I'm grasping, or maybe I'm putting my wishes.
Well, the timeline for this too is the final book in this series actually takes place about 12 years after this one. So Terry kind of gets moved as no longer the main protagonist. His little brother picks up at the same age Terry was at the beginning. So it's kind of keeps it in the YA venue that the main character is a 12 to 16-year-old, but Terry will be in his, he'll be over 30 years old. Yeah. So he'll be then in charge of Last Call, and most of the other mercs are gone by then. They're they're really old, nobody has that. None of them have that interesting Methuselah treatment that other people we've seen in the universe occasionally have. As an example with Peepo, this is 100 years, almost before the current day Cartwrights and all that, and Peepo was mainly in action then. So you get the feeling she's not entirely immortal, I guess you could say.
Right.
Or I guess that's about all I'm willing to say.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see how Terry's brother develops. And you gave us some glimpses of that toward the end of the book, and that was fascinating.
He's only a couple of years old, and he's kind of way ahead of the curve.
And the absolute wonderful heroic arc of the orcas it almost had me in tears. That was some of the best writing I think you've ever done.
I hoped it would, because that was some hard stuff to write with that. I mean, orcas have been my thing since I was a kid. I've always loved them. And the chance to do this in a way and really treat them as not only the awesome species that they are, but then have this intersection of their old lives with the spiritual undertones, and then they are thrust headlong into this. Now they're an advanced species, and they're highly they're already highly intelligent. Everybody believes so, but now they're sentient on the level that we are. So they're thinking about things they never thought about before, and they're also pretty obviously being manipulated as well at the same time. First by us. And then when they kind of grew up, now it's their strings are being pulled by the Caretaker. for its own purposes. As you said, it has its own goals. And if the goals happen to overlap, and if the goals overlap, then the humans kind of get what they want. And if they don't, well, they're not going to get what they want, as Terry's mother finds out in this book.
There were some of the most brutal and heroic fight scenes in this book, even though it's a young adult book, that I've ever read. It was like you had all of this pent-up writing that you had to get out, and you put every bit of it in this book.
There's a lot of hours reading, that's for sure. And I always respected Robert Heinlein's YAs, and that they didn't shy away from the hard stuff. I reread through a bunch of them as I was doing this, just to kind of get his feel and to kind of see where he put the limits at. And modern YA really goes in much more for shock factor, and it spends way too much time dealing with he and sheing and intersexual relationships and stuff. And I really didn't want to have that to be a central theme. It's hard to avoid it at Terry's age because he's 16 now, so that's kind of the elephant in the room. But it's a paralleling plot line, whereas the reality is that they are mercenaries and they're living in a very tenuous situation. I mean, we saw that in the first book when, just in a blink of an eye, Terry lost his leg. And you've got some of that sort of stuff going on too. During one of the missions, one of the mercs die, and it's just bang, he's gone. And it has a serious effect on Terry because he's still a young man and having to realize that this is what he's doing. He has doubts like anybody do. Do I really want to live in a life where, my friends can die in an instant and I can do nothing about it? It's same kind of decision any modern warrior would face too. I never served, but I've talked to a lot of people, and those realities are one of the things that really shapes their lives for the rest of their lives. That a buddy can just be gone. A battle buddy can be gone in an instant, and it's not your fault. It's not his fault. It's just the way things happen.
Well, and you speak on something there that is kind of a bugbear of mine. When I was growing up, I am also a huge Heinlein fan. Above my bed is the entire Virginia collection.
I want that. I want that so bad, but living in an RV is not very compatible.
No, and take my word for it, it's bigger than you think it is.
Yeah. It's a small suitcase. I know it's a lot of books,
and worth every penny. But for those of you who don't know, the Virginia collection is a leather-bound, multi-volume set of pretty much every word that Robert Heinlein ever wrote.
It's put out by the Robert and Virginia Heinlein Prize Trust, I believe is the word for it, and they came out with it about 6 years ago, and I think it's over $1,000, but they're all leather bound, beautiful books.
They are. They're absolutely beautiful. And Robert Heinlein's writing was writing of the exceptional. His characters, his heroes, especially the young adult novels, were average people thrown in unusual situations who rose to the occasion and became exceptional people. Yep. Today's young adult novels are average people put into unusual situations who form a collective group, and they rise to the average of the group.
I never quite thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. It's much more dependent on the collective than it is the individual.
And you have to take everybody's group wisdom. And I was for 40 years in a business where life and death situations happened every day. And I will tell you from personal experience that you had people who you could depend on who were average people who did a great job, but you had leaders. You had people who were above average, people who you turned to in moments of crisis who made exceptional decisions. And we need books for our young people who encourage leadership and encourage decision making. And the book you wrote does that.
I tried to get some of that in there. I really wanted to show some of the mentoring process with Terry and Doc, where he's trying to move him into what it means to be an NCO and what it means to eventually be a leader. Because, Doc is in his 60s and he's more than aware that he can't do this his whole life. And at the same time, the path they have chosen, all of the colonists and scientists and people on Hoarfrost, is they've made themselves outcast with humanity. They can't really go back to Earth. It just isn't something most of them can do. So he knows that someone will have to eventually lead them in this sort. And he doesn't see himself as a leader, Doc, but he really is. But in the long term, he knows he's also just not old enough to carry this through for the long term. And when I eventually introduce them for where they are and what happened to these people, I think a lot of people will really be kind of shocked and amazed. And I don't know if it's an overused term, but I think they'll be surprised to see how that all shook out in the long run. Where are they now? You know, it's now, I think in modern, what I'm writing right now in the Phoenix Initiative, it is still 110 years in the future from where they are right there, which is 16 years after first. Yeah, sounds about right. Well, about 125 years total time. So you know that almost none of these people are probably still alive. So everyone's wondering, where'd they go? Where are the stations? Where are they living? What happened? I mean, I could write series and series of books about this, and instead I have to kind of compress it down into, 4 books.
So, do you have any other books coming out?
The next one probably scheduled will be one that I'm co-writing with John Osborne, which is Caveat Emptor. It's inspired by the role-playing game in that it was part of the Kickstarter, and it's kind of the first one we're referring to as a comedy. It's not an outright slapstick kind of comedy, but it is a very comedic situation for mercenaries to find themselves in. I can't give a lot of details about it, but I will say that some of the mercenary groups from the fan club are in this. Their units are redshirted as opposed to individuals. One of the things about our group is I think 20% of our fans have been in a book at one point or another. And so we had to kind of avoid that. So instead, we're actually redshirting units. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that.
That always is fun to do. John Ringo did that a lot with his books.
Absolutely.
Both, onesie twosie, and then in large groups in certain books, especially in the
Black Tide Rising.
Yes. So hopefully a lot of your fans will see themselves in your Caveat Emptor book.
Yeah, they'll at least see the analogies of themselves, and there's some pretty fun characters in there. Because the units in the Mercenary Guild, they all have to have TONEs and layouts for what kind of unit they are. So we had to kind of mix and match to put together the ground units we needed for the stories and stuff. Which unit's going to be the key ones? Where we're going to do POV characters? We're about 25,000 words into that. We should be done with that probably in a couple of weeks.
That'd be great.
It should be slotted in for early next year, is my guess. Chris has slots available for us about every 5 weeks, so I'm going to try to see how many I can fill with that. The next big solo I'm going to write will be the very first Winged Hussars book to come out since Winged Hussars. Winged Hussars Andromeda is the title for that one.
I can't wait for that. I will tell you that this is a really unusual podcast for a couple of reasons. One is it's going to be extremely late because the November podcast always comes out a little late anyway because we wait for FactoryCon to be over with so we can do an after action report. And then the second reason is this is the first Future Books podcast where we're having Chris, Kevin, and Mark back to back. And I call you the 3 wise old men of Chris Kennedy Publishing. The triumvirate of wisdom.
Thanks, I guess.
Well, I mean, you think about it, the 3 of you guys are the foundation that the publishing house is built on.
Well, Chris Kennedy Publishing went from a couple of books to, dozens of writers in the course of the Horseman Universe and Salvage Title, of course. So, I can't dispute that. Chris gets all the credit for that because he's the publisher, he's the brains behind the operation.
But without the intellectual property, which you were very first one to bring the first big piece of IP to the publishing house, would the rest of it exist? So I asked Kevin when he was on to tell his origin story. He was on the planet. His parents put him in the little spaceship, and the planet blew up, and it landed. So, can you tell us? About being in the lab and the spider came and bit you, and
as far as being an author goes?
Yeah, well, as far as meeting Chris and bringing the Four Horsemen and how it all started.
It's a sordid story. I first met Chris at a LibertyCon. It was only I don't remember any details of it. We didn't talk for much. It's kind of a chance. You meet a lot of authors at LibertyCon. If you've never gone, everybody should. It's really a lit con, but because often authors sometimes either come close to or outnumber fans that are there. So it's one of those great chances of fan to meet all of these authors and not be in a crowd of 1,000 people trying to greet one. It's much more intimate. It's been going on a long time. It's in Chattanooga, Tennessee in July. It's just one of the greatest conventions. It's that one and Fantasy. Fantasy is like the minor league practice warm up for LibertyCon each year.
Yeah, Tim was wonderful, and Brandy does him well.
Absolutely. Brandy is a perfect successor for Uncle Timmy for all the work that he did. No doubt about that. So anyway, I met him there, and a few months later, I'd had the idea for the nexus of the Four Horsemen Universe. It's kind of like the bits and pieces. If I showed you my outline for the original book, it would look nothing like what we ended up with. But I had the idea, and I talked to him at a convention called In Conjunction, which is the Indianapolis convention, which takes place like a week or two. I think at that point it was actually a month later than LibertyCon that year. And I said, hey, do you want to write this with me? Because I've been trying to. I knew the key, a lot of young authors, if you're listening, one of your keys to really get a breakout is give a chance to write with an experienced author, because they will be able to mentor you and help you along, and it just gives you so much more energy. It's really amazing because if you can be pushed to greatness, another author can help you do that. Not even by cajoling. It's just like being next to them and seeing what they're doing makes you want to do more. And I knew that was a possibility if I could find an author. And I'd been trying for a while. And Chris goes, "Oh, well, I'm really busy." And my thought was, okay, just another no. I've had plenty of those. So I finished coming up with the idea for Cartwrights, and I started writing it. In fact, the original name for it was The White Company. It wasn't Cartwrights Cavaliers. And then somewhere along the line, in the first third of it, I changed to the Cartwrights, and I started fleshing out how the universe was going to work, giving it details, finding the mechanics, figuring out how space travel works, all that stuff. And fast forward a year later, at another LibertyCon, another In Conjunction the next year, Chris is there and goes, "Hey, I'm not busy now if you want to write that book." And I'm like, "Well, I'm already like halfway done with it." He's, "Well, let me read it." I mean, I knew he self-pubbed also. I didn't know he was actually kind of in the process of wanting to be a publisher as well, full on. There's a few people who publish their own stuff and do a few other people's stuffs, but he had a bigger vision for what he could do. So I said, sure, I gave it to him, figuring I'd hear back in a couple of weeks. I saw him the next day, and he goes, "I read it." I was thinking, it's already 60,000 words. And I said, "Oh," and so all of a sudden I get excited. I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I don't know how to tell you this." I'm like, "Oh my God." "I absolutely love it. I want to publish it." I'm like, "What?" So as all great things happen in a bar, we sat down at the bar at the hotel there at the Marriott Indianapolis, and the Four Horsemen Universe was born. He says, "I like it so much, I want to write 2 of these units that you talk about." And he even changed their names. I'd have to look back to see what they were called, but they were not called the Asbrand Solution and Golden Horde. They were something else entirely. And that's where we split it all up and talked about what we do, and we write each of these books. And the rest was very organic at that point. We literally responded as things went. The idea for the anthology just popped into our heads at some point. I don't know if he had it or I did it. And we came up with that after Asbrand came out, the second book, because Cartwrights came out and it did okay. Asbrand came out and it did a lot better. Cartwrights did. And then that first anthology came out and we started seeing sales in the thousands then. That's when we realized we really hit something. And by the end, when the first 4 books, not counting the anthology, when the end of the last of those first 4 came out, which was Wings to SARS, with that point we had momentum. And it was just really no looking back at that. But a lot of it was his acumen with knowing how to publish stuff, how it worked. He'd studied it all. It's, the mystic arts, I like to refer to it. And another part of it is his gravitas as a publisher is unbeatable. You talk in the small publishing industry about people that you would literally hand your life to and say, "Here, do this." Chris is one of those. I would trust him with everything that I have, and I have. I've sent him books that he's got out, and he got a hold of me a month later. "Oh, we forgot to do a contract." I'm like, "Oh, okay, send it over to me." That's the kind of guy he is. I don't worry about it. Early on, he made a mistake on a royalty payment and called me. He was all upset because I made a mistake. I didn't pay you enough. And I said, "What was it?" He says, $12. And out of several thousand in royalties, he was all broken up over $12. That's the kind of guy Chris is. So if any of you are out there thinking about talking to a small press publisher, I would recommend Chris in a heartbeat. I absolutely would not hesitate. And a lot of other authors out there would probably agree with me.
I have to agree with everything you say. Me, big science fiction fan my entire life, tried several times to be a writer. Finally, at mid-50s, realized that was not my thing. Cannot write to save my butt. But
it's not something everybody can do.
But I can promote.
Okay, that's a really important skill too. Let me tell you.
I can read a book and tell whether or not it's marketable. I can tell whether or not somebody can tell a story. I know the difference between a book that will sell and a book that does not have legs. And walked up to Chris because I had read the Four Horsemen, and then pretty much read everything else that CKP had written. Chris did not know me from Adam. Walked up to him at a convention. Actually drove to the convention, particularly because I knew he was going to be there. After he had spoken, said, "Hey, Randy Willis, love your publishing company. How can I help?" And we had a conversation. I said, I have a bunch of computer equipment, would love to do a podcast. And, if you've got too many slush manuscripts to read, and it would help take a load off of you for me to read your manuscripts and make some recommendations, be glad to do that. He didn't know me from Adam. A week later, he's sending me manuscripts to read.
Well, that's the thing with him too. His instincts are like 99.9% on. I've almost never seen him misfire. He's got really good instincts.
And he does not give you a chance to breathe. If you offer to do something, he'll hand you a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, I got an email from this book, from Blood in the Water, that says, it's 7 words you're not allowed to use anymore. Because I took so long to write this, I got lazy and I've been teaching. He's been my mentor. He's been teaching me how to write. He says, "You're the best storyteller I've ever known," which him saying that to me blows me away. And he says, "And you're also one of the worst writers I've ever known."
Yeah, and people don't realize there's a difference between those two either.
There is. I'm just blessed enough that I'm that good of a damn storyteller that I've had the time to develop my writing skills. In this book, I fell back. I have to admit it, because it took so long to write it. Came back to it 3 times. That's really hard then to go back and go through it and do the kind of corrections and looking you did. So I ended up handing it up in worse cases than I thought. And, one of my biggest sins still is, and probably will be the rest of my life, is I will mix characters up sometime. In this one, you'll notice there's a character called Rath, which actually nobody else has caught yet, but that's actually the same character that's in Cartwright's Cavaliers.
Oh.
This is the introduction of that character 85 years earlier. Prior. So I'm setting up that whole plot. You're starting to understand more. If you go back and reread Cartwright's Cavaliers and read about what Valrath, I'm pretty sure, or Galrath, one of the two. See, now I don't remember either. Anyway, he is involved in some stuff that Jim gets involved with and has a big fight in Arachnar with. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. So that's all I want to say. If readers haven't read it yet, you'll want to go back and look at Cartwright and go, "What is this guy? What does he do?" Oh, it'll make more sense.
I would rather have a great storyteller than a great writer. If I have to pick between them.
You're absolutely right. I've read quite a few books by people who make a fair amount of errors when they write, but the story's so damn good you don't care.
Yeah.
Then you've got the opposite. You've got Larry Correia, who's both.
Yeah. David Weber is a great writer. He just happens to be a great storyteller also.
Yeah, there's not many of those, and bless their hearts, I think they're probably constructed by an alien project somewhere. But that's like Grammar's. I have a passing acquaintance with Grammar. It's like, as Chris says, you seem to hate it.
Grammar was my mother's mother.
If I could go back and I could make any advice to a young author, take the English classes and pay attention, because I did and I didn't. So, and like he'll say way back when we got started, like the second or third book, he talked about, you keep doing this and these particles and this kind of stuff. And I stopped and I said, "Chris, I don't understand anything you're saying."
Yeah. Chris knows what commas are actually for.
You're right. He's literally the first editor I had, that really is into the technique of it and everything. I've had other editors, but they didn't really, they just didn't have what he has. Chris is just he's a doctor of education. He was a principal, he was a naval aviator, commanded people. He's got all those things, and he's melded together into this science fiction machine that just turns out good books,
Aren't you glad he doesn't put a grade at the top of your manuscript?
I know, right? I'd probably be a D- at this one. I've got an urban fantasy I'm sitting on. I'm hoping to finish and get out. I've published 3 short stories in it, so the potential's there, but I'm just not sure how to go forward with it yet. That and my wife hasn't finished writing it yet. I'm co-writing the first novel with her, and she's a new author for the purpose of books, so it's taking a little more work, I'm God help me being the mentor this time.
Before I forget about it, I really want to put a spotlight on, are you going to continue your Patreon this year?
My wife just said, "Are you talking about me in there?" Yeah, I'm just mentioning you in the fantasy book. Anyway, you were saying, sorry.
No problem. I said I really want to put, or if you are continuing, I really want to put a spotlight on your Patreon for this year. Are you going to continue that and talk a little bit about that and how people can participate?
I'd love to see it grow and to put more effort into it and stuff. I've got a core of decent supporters now that are helping, but it's a heck of a tool, and I'd love to put more content out if there were more people there, to absorb it. So
okay, so first of all, where is it? How do people find it?
So the Patreon's really easy. It's patreon.com/Mark H. Wandry. And that's Mark, M-A-R-K-H, letter H, W-A-N-D-R-E-Y. The advantage of having an unusual name is usually you get direct links to yourself instead of Pat William number 323 or something like that. It's horrible because nobody seems to pronounce it right, but it's nice because it's easy to find.
So it's patreon.com/Mark H. Wandry. People, if you don't know what Patreon is, it is actually a modern day form of an old system of supporting artists. It allows you to go there, and if you put in that URL, it will allow you to directly support someone who gives you great entertainment. So if you are the type of person who goes once a month to the movie theater and take a date, you spend $25 to get 2 tickets and a Coke. Instead of doing that, spend the $25 a month at Patreon for Mark, and that will get you a certain number of entertainment units every year, because instead of Mark having to go and work somewhere and not be in front of a keyboard creating Four Horsemen content and books, he will be sitting in front of that keyboard creating content for you year around.
Well, we do stuff like generally once a month we try to have a hangout where all the Patreon subscribers are welcome to hang out and talk about what's going on and ask questions about it. I do Ask Me Anything, which is not quite, it doesn't mean I'm going to answer it, but you can ask me anything. They can earn one of the things you can earn after support after a certain amount of time is you can get a free a Faye. Joy hand crochets like critters from the Four Horsemen Universe, and she'll make one just for you.
And they're really cute. I've seen them.
They are, I agree. She has Faye and Depic, and when the Kickstarter comes out, the Rules of Engagement, the role-playing game, which will be out next year, with that comes a whole bunch of other aliens like Menshai and Sumatuzo and all these different aliens. Then those will be available for people to buy as well at that point that you can make or get as a bonus for being a Patreon member. And I've got support levels as low as $5 a month. You don't have to give me like $200 a month or something. $5 even, that even makes a difference. Everything makes a difference. It's a bill paid. It's a little less work I have to do outside. And it lets me, like you said, concentrate on putting bytes onto discs, I guess you say now, instead of, doing other stuff.
And believe me, it's worth it just to get a Faye. The crocheted Fays are really, really cute. I'm going to have one. I just haven't been at a convention at the same time that they've been there, and they haven't been sold out.
And they've evolved over the years to being even better. Every time she makes modifications, they get even better. Yeah. So she even does like a crocheted Rogel. If anybody knows the Rogel, they're basically like big octopus. And those things are, they're absolutely huge. And they're expensive too, but I haven't seen her try to knit anything she can't. She's a machine.
Mark is a tremendous writer, but joy was named appropriately.
She does give a lot of joy in her life.
Okay, Mark, tell people anything else that you want to tell them. How do they keep track of what's going on with Mark other than Patreon? What's coming next? What have we missed?
Well, one of the easiest ways is both on Instagram and Facebook. That's Mark Wandry author. I have a couple other personal accounts I don't use anymore. I concentrate on the author account now, so you can find me there. My direct webpage is www.worldmaker, all one word, WORLDMAKER.US. Yeah, that's a domain. It's not used very often, which is kind of why we picked it. It was cheap. There's links on there to buy things like, there's the Merchants Guild is a link off there. You can buy challenge coins. You can buy some knitted items and stuff. Crocheted items Joy makes sometimes. We try to keep that updated. It's a trick. But we're going to link through that and probably through the Instagram coming up. I think Joy announced it, but I don't know a lot of people know. She will be doing a serialized YouTube channel reading of Earthsong Overture, which is my other military science fiction series, much more space opera style, because we're moving towards eventually in a year or so coming out with finally the 7th book in that series. I want to get that series written up. I don't want to pull a Gurm here and leave everybody abandoned for a decade on that. So I owe people a book on that, and I'll be working on it. So they should be doing a chapter like a day, 3 times a day. And I think we're going to work something in there, maybe where I'll do a Q&A session afterwards, and we'll make that a Patreon available content.
Well, fabulous. Mark, you don't know how much I appreciate you coming back and being on the podcast.
Oh, not at all. I like any author. I love talking about myself.
And I'm hoping that you get back to your previous prolific writing speed, and we start seeing 4 and 5 books a year again.
I'd love to get back to that. I topped out at 6. I'd like to get back there. I really would. Don't let my readers think it's because I'm tired of writing. It's just because, life has to take it the way it comes at you. And this is how it is right now, but I will get back there.
I understand 1,000%. I'm kind of in the same place. We miss you. Everybody misses you. So anything we can do. And I look forward to doing this again a lot sooner than a year and a half later.
Randall, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the CKP Future Books Podcast with host Randall Willis. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving it a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you subscribe. Show likes and channel subscriptions are also much appreciated on the CKP YouTube channel. Finally, if you'd like to know more about this author or others on the CKP roster, visit chriskennedypublishing.com. Thanks for listening to the CKP Future Books Podcast. We'll see you next time.